Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abrium Opats. Today we're going to go over the Saints and the Panthers, and this was a surprising game to say the least. Coming into this game, guys, the Saints had won 8 out of the last 9 meetings against Carolina, and I don't know about you, but for me, I wouldn't say that I wasn't giving the Panthers a shot in this game. I think they had a chance, but I was definitely leaning towards New Orleans, specifically after their domination of the Green Bay Packers in Week 1. We're going to get into a game breakdown, going to change it up a little bit, and just do kind of the key moments in this game. We're going to talk about what were the turning points, how it turned the tide, and why. And then at the end of this, we're going to wrap up overall team stats. We're going to look over the player profiles, what these guys did individually, and then talk about how we can project that for fantasy purposes next week, specifically with their matchups, and how we can feel as far as comfortability with these guys moving forward. But before we get into that, and without further ado, let's get into this week's Relentless Rundown. So starting off in this game, guys, it felt clear, at least to me, that Carolina really wanted to make a statement in this game. They were determined in that first possession to get the ball to their playmakers, and they did. Run CMC had a 32-yard catch, and they were really trying to push it down the field as well. Darnold looked calm and confident early in this game, which you know was critical, and they had to keep that ravenous defensive line off of the Saints to give Darnold some time. They were able to do that. They moved the ball down the field with ease, and this drive ends right off the bat, just 3 minutes into this game, with a 20-yard touchdown strike to former Minnesota Viking Brandon Zylstra. I cannot state this enough. This was a huge way to start the game for Carolina. Coming in, looking to prove, right, that last week wasn't a fluke. They were able to hold on against a less than ideal Jets squad. And so coming in, especially New Orleans, are riding high in this game. For them to be able to come in 3 minutes in and get that touchdown, put the Saints a little bit on their heels. And you start to question, right? Is New Orleans as good as they looked last week? Because they were absolutely dominant. Everything they did was successful. And we were hoping, at least if you're a Saints fan, that they wanted to carry that forward, that momentum, into Week 2 against the Panthers. Immediately, we see that New Orleans is off kilter. They don't like to be behind, and even though it's only 7-0, they take a sack. There's multiple false starts for the Saints offense. Winston is completely out of rhythm, and they're forced to punt. In the first quarter, guys, Sam Darnold looked amazing. He had 135 yards passing, and the Panthers are able to extend this lead to 10-0, which once again puts New Orleans in a bit of a pressure spot. DJ Moore then follows it up with a 3-yard touchdown late in the second quarter as we get right under that 2-minute warning. It is 17-0 Panthers, and at this point, Sam Darnold is up to 202 yards passing. New Orleans trying to get something going right before the half, get some points on the board, and they have an intentional grounding by Jameis Winston. A ton of pressure in the entire first half for the Carolina Panthers, specifically on that defensive line. But they're also blitzing from the safety position. They threw in some corner blitzes. The linebackers were very aggressive. It was clear they wanted to keep Winston on his heels, and he looked that way for the entire game. So same possession, Winston in a third and not so good is forced to make a bad decision. He throws into triple coverage, and it's picked. And at this point, you know that there's some mind games going on after his 5-touchdown performance last week. He does not look like even the shell of that player, and the Saints are in trouble. The Saints, after getting shut out in the first half, do get the ball to start the third quarter, but they're unable to get anything going on the ground. You see them on the first 2 snaps of the second half try to get Kamara involved. He was silent in the first half, ends up being silent really in most of this game. They get into another 3rd and long situation where they're behind the sticks and they're forced to punt. Now, on the punt, the ball actually hits one of the players that is kick returning for the Panthers. And you could see that this would have been a critical moment had the Saints been able to recover. However, their punt returner Erickson makes an amazing heads-up play and follows that ball and is able to jump on it to keep possession with Carolina. This would have put New Orleans in awesome field position, given some momentum back to them. They would have had the ball near the red zone at the 23-yard line, but it was not to be. Special teams ends up being an unsung hero for Carolina in this game, and a little bit later we'll talk about more as to why that is. So a lot of late penalties as well for New Orleans, and that was consistent throughout the first half. It did not help their situation at all. They were already struggling offensively, but when you add penalties to an offense who hasn't been able to get anything to click, it really puts them in a much worse situation than it could have been. So Carolina gets a 50-yard field goal attempt on this possession. Once again, special teams comes into play. This field goal is blocked by the Saints. Another opportunity to turn the tides, get some good field position, get some comfortability and confidence in that offense. They had an opportunity here, and that's New Orleans, to actually return that blocked field goal for a touchdown. But there was a hustle, effort, will play by the holder, Joseph Charlton, who made not a tackle, but he slowed down the returner just enough to allow his team to then rally around the ball, make the tackle, and instead of this swinging 17-7 New Orleans, it's still 17-0. Saints have the ball, Carolina 39-yard line. So the Saints, great field position, looking to get some points on the board, and what do? Immediately a holding call, push them back once again behind the sticks. They're able to move this to a 3rd down and 5 from the 33. But they decide to, instead of going to the air and continuing to move the ball downfield, they run the ball, and he's stuffed short. So I think that might have showed a little bit of lack of confidence at this point in Jameis Winston, not giving him the option to sit back and throw the ball downfield when you know you're going to have to put on some points in this game. They end up taking a sack on 4th down and 5 and turn the ball over. Another huge defensive play. The Carolina Panthers, like we said, their defensive line dominated in this game. They were swarming to the ball. Winston did not have time to make his reads, if he can, and so they are turning it over here to Carolina. 5 minutes to go in the 3rd quarter. So Carolina now with the ball, and a little bit concerning, run CMC. Christian McCaffrey is out on this drive. He gets a little banged up on the previous possession, and he's forced to sit. They take him in, check him out, make sure that he's okay. He would return later in this game. And this is when it goes a little bit south for Carolina. Sam Darnold clearly less comfortable in this offense without being able to lean on CMC. Makes his first really bad pass of the day. He feels pressure, and he kind of does a little flip shovel pass to Chuba Hubbard, who was number 1 covered, but number 2, the pass didn't even get close to him, and it's actually intercepted by Roach, one of the defensive tackles for New Orleans, and you can feel now maybe a little momentum off of that turnover, and the tide starts to turn for the Saints. And immediately, they are able to capitalize. They start the possession in the red zone, and it's a touchdown run from 8 yards out by Jameis Winston. There's still 14 minutes, 37 seconds to go. It's now 17-7 Carolina. And it'll be interesting to see, right, what happens after this, because now finally New Orleans shows a little bit of life, albeit off of a turnover, and how does Carolina respond? CMC back in the next possession. Great news for not only fantasy owners, but also Panther fans in general. He has a great catch on 3rd down and 4 to get a first, but the Panthers end up punting. And now down 2 possessions, New Orleans with a chance to bring this to a 1-possession game and really put some pressure on that Carolina offense. However, Winston is unable to build on that previous possession, almost fumbles. It's actually called a fumble on the field. They review it. They say his hand is moving forward as the ball is coming out, and so it doesn't end up being a turnover, but they still have to punt it back to Carolina, and that momentum seems to be lost. On the ensuing possession for Carolina, they take it down the field. They look excellent offensively yet again, spreading the ball around, peppering DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey with touches, and Run CMC finishes the drive with an 11-yard touchdown run. They miss the extra point, but it's still 23-7 Panthers. Now only 5 minutes, 53 seconds left to play. And at that point in the game, guys, Run CMC had 26 touches. Now the Saints end up turning it over on downs. The Panthers add a late field goal to this game to make it 26-7, and that would be your final score. Panthers move to 2-0. Saints fall to 1-1. And we talked about it earlier, guys. This was a statement game for Carolina, and they came out fast, fierce, and they played well together. It was an all phases win for this team. Offensively, they were excellent. Sam Darnold airing it out in the first half. Defensively, specifically that defensive line, but obviously even the corners, linebackers, and safeties got involved in bringing pressure. Their defensive scheme really threw New Orleans off, and they just never looked comfortable, did the Saints, on offense. Alvin Kamara completely shut down in this game, did not look like he had an inch of air and no space to work with. We know how dangerous he can be there, and we just saw they were targeting Kamara early and often, but couldn't get anything going, and they were rallying, the Carolina Panthers were, to make stops so that he did not have a chance to break one. There were 4 sacks in this game by Carolina. The O-line looked great. They were able to protect Sam Darnold, allow him to be comfortable, specifically because of great play calling by their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. There were a lot of designed rollouts for Carolina to give Darnold time and space to be able to read and make the right throw, and he did. Carolina also 8 out of 15 on 3rd down conversions, able to continue to move the ball, and that was huge for time of possession as well. We look at New Orleans, and they just never were able to do what they wanted to do in this game. We saw last week how great they looked when they were able to pound the rock, keep themselves ahead of the sticks, keep pressure on the defense, and then allow Jameis Winston to kind of play off of that, set up that play action, take some shots downfield. But when this running game isn't working for New Orleans, guys, they are a completely different team, and I think that might be dangerous for them as we look up matchups moving forward, because they may look great when all things are clicking, but if not, we saw the very opposite end of the spectrum where they can look absolutely brutal on offense. I'd like to take this moment to say, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any comments, you think I'm off in one of my takes, please leave that comment down below. I'd love to start a conversation with you guys. But now, let's get into the fantasy breakdown for each team, and we're going to start in New Orleans with the Saints. And honestly, not a ton to talk about in this game for New Orleans because they looked bad. We'll start with Jameis Winston, who was obviously off most of this game. Frankly, he looked atrocious in this game, guys. He was clearly ineffective without that running game to lean on. It was an absolute night and day from what we saw last week, where he threw 5 touchdowns on only 148 yards, and he moves back down into that probably bench for now category. He couldn't set up play action and was pressured in the entire game. He was running for his life. He finished 11 of 22 for just 111 yards. He had 2 interceptions. Now, he did add a little bit of value on the ground. 3 rushes, 19 yards. He was able to stumble into the end zone from 8 yards out to really save owners' days if anyone did end up playing him this week. But like I said, bench candidate for this performance. I'm certainly not dropping him right now because we know that this was kind of a worst case scenario for the Saints, and surely better days are ahead, but I am holding off for now, especially with their week 3 matchup against New England on the road. Now we're going to move to a stud who just didn't look it in this game. He was drafted early in the first round, probably a top 5 pick. But Alvin Kamara, guys, looked dreadful in this game, and I'm not sure it was entirely his fault, though I think some of the blame could go to him. He was definitely looking, especially as the game got further and further away from the Saints, that he was trying to maybe push for that big play a little bit more than taking what was there. He finishes with 8 carries, only 5 yards, not a typo, and then he did have 4 receptions on 6 targets for 25 yards through the air, so just 30 total yards on the day for Alvin Kamara. You hate to see that. Fantasy owners certainly got burned, and this is concerning coming off of what was a best case scenario last week to see how bad this offense can look when things don't go well for them. I still think that he's a high-end RB2 against the Patriots because he is going to continue to see touches, but you certainly don't love what you saw from him, and there is maybe a little more focus that we need to take on Kamara looking forward. I would not sell him low right now, guys, but I would certainly be very careful with your shares of Alvin Kamara moving forward. We're going to go to wide receivers just for a second, but honestly not much to talk about. We'll touch base a little bit on Marquez Callaway, preseason darling, who looked absolutely spectacular in that last preseason game of the season, but he was just 2 receptions for 4 targets here. He had 8 yards. He's someone I'm not dropping. I'm not going to panic and let him go, but we're definitely not starting him. And if he has another 0 performance like this, and in week 1 he did the same, if he continues that trend, he is a likely drop candidate in the coming future. You're not starting any other wideouts in New Orleans outside of that. Even tight end wise, Adam Troutman, he was invisible, so didn't look good for New Orleans as a whole on offense. And now we're going to go to Carolina, who obviously looked great on all sides of the ball in this game. Offensively, there's a lot of players that performed here who you're going to want in your starting lineups next week, especially because they go on the road to the Houston Texans. Definitely a plus matchup for these guys, and we're going to start with Sammy Darnold. He looked really good in this game, guys. He came out hot and fast, over 200 yards before halftime. He was accurate, and besides that late interception in the 3rd quarter, which I'm not sure what he was doing on that, every other decision that he made, every other throw that he threw was accurate and on point. So he looked really good. He finished 26 out of 38, 305 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. Now, he did have that interception, and he fumbled, but he didn't lose it, so that doesn't hurt you from a fantasy perspective. He was really able to play off of the threat of Run CMC, whether he was utilizing him out of the backfield or not. And I think he's got sneaky QB2 upside against the Texans next week. Christian McCaffrey, phenomenal as always. Now, he had 24 carries, only turned that into a tune of 72 yards, so just 3 yards a carry on the ground, but he does what he always does and produces catching the ball out of the backfield. He had 6 targets, 5 catches for 65 yards. He was able to punch in that touchdown late as well, and you look at the touches, guys, 29 in total, so you can't ask for more than that from a volume standpoint. He is a locked and loaded, set it and forget it, RB1. And next week against Houston, game-winning potential. I could see him easily going for over 200 yards of total offense with a couple scores. He is going to be lights out next week, you can book it. We're also going to move now to the wide receiver core, and it starts with DJ Moore. Awesome in this game, guys. He made some spectacular contested catches. He had 11 targets, so you love to see that target share. He was able to catch 8 of them to the tune of 79 yards. Had a great touchdown catch right before the end of the first half that really helped extend that lead for Carolina. And interestingly enough, he was not shadowed by Marshon Lattimore in this game, which I think helped him in that production category. I know myself had concerns that if Lattimore was on him, maybe we wouldn't see such a great game out of DJ Moore. He's a low-end wide receiver 1 next week at Houston. I'm starting him with confidence moving forward until I see something that would tell me otherwise. To the other wide receivers for Carolina, and we'll start with Robbie Anderson because he was that wide receiver 2 being drafted in this offense, and also Terrence Marshall, the rookie. And each of these guys did have 3 catches. They have 9 total targets, so these were the clear 2 and 3 options in this offense. Terrace Marshall right now, clearly someone who needs to be left on the bench, but he's a hold, and with an injury to either of the main 2 guys, could quickly move up the ranks. I think when we look at Robbie Anderson, it's concerning, right? He had only 38 yards with his 3 catches, but he did have 6 targets. So they were still looking his way, and I think he's got wide receiver 3 type pedigree with some high upside for next week in that matchup with the Texans. To kind of finish out the pass catchers for the Panthers, we'll go to no other than Dan Arnold, the tight end. Now, 4 targets, he turned those into 3 catches for 55 yards. I like him a lot more right now over Ian Thomas, who seemed to be the blocking tight end for the majority of this game. I'm not starting him right now, but he's certainly a speculative add if you are a team needing tight end help. And that's it, ladies and gents. If you are new to the channel, if you haven't done it yet, and why that would be, I don't know, please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate your support. If you have any questions, drop them down below. Thank you for watching. This is Relentless Press. I am Avery Mopax. We'll see you next time.